Hello, I'm Casey and I'm a web developer. I'm going to teach you about one of my favorite languages, CSS. Now that we've gathered content, marked it up, and thought about design, we'll learn how to add our design ideas to our content. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Like HTML, CSS is another language we use when building websites. Remember all those HTML elements Catherine talked about? Paragraph elements, image elements, block quote elements, etc.? Well, CSS defines how those HTML elements are displayed. While HTML creates the structure of the page, CSS is what makes the page look nice. Just like at the beginning of the HTML section, this code might look confusing now, but once we're done, you'll understand what's going on. As mentioned, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. But before we talk about the cascading part of CSS, let's talk about the style sheet part. A style sheet is a list of rules for how we want our HTML to be styled. To define a CSS rule, you first need to decide what you want to style. Let's style all the H2 elements. The element you want to style is called a selector. After your selector, you need a set of opening and closing curly braces. This lets the browser know that all the styles in between the braces belong to the H2 element. And finally, in between our curly braces, we can start adding styles. Similar to attributes on an HTML element, CSS styles are made of two things: properties and values. Properties, which come first, are always accompanied by colons. Values are always accompanied by semicolons, which denotes the end of a style. The property is the part of the selector we want to style, and the value is how we want to style it. In this case, we want to style the font size of the H2 text, and the value here says we want to set the font size of the H2 text to 22 pixels. In our CSS pane, we will type our selector, H2. After the selector, we'll type a space and then an opening curly brace. CodePen helps us by automatically adding our closing curly brace. All we have to do is hit enter and our CSS rule is ready for us to add our styles. After adding our font size style, we can see our H2 headings got taller in the browser. A CSS style can have as many property value pairs as you want. In our case here, we want all of our H2 elements to not only be 22 pixels, but we want them to have a certain color and font. We also want them to all be uppercase and have some extra space below them. With that, let's finish styling our H2 elements. There are many different properties and values you can use to style your selectors. Note that not all properties and values can be paired. For example, the font size property cannot have a color value. It must have a size value. For easy reference, pull up our CSS cheat sheet to see what properties and values can go together. By now, you should be really familiar with HTML elements. You've used them to mark up your content, and you've used them as selectors to style your content. There are a lot of times when we are styling our websites where we don't want to style all instances of an element. Sometimes we want to style only one or two instances. In these cases, we can add certain attributes to our HTML and use the value as a selector instead of the element itself. Let's target a paragraph of text by adding a class attribute to the paragraph element. The value of our class attribute can be whatever we want as long as it doesn't have any spaces and starts with a letter. Since this paragraph, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, is going to be a caption below an image in our website, let's set the value to caption, also known as our class name. The class name, caption, will be our new CSS selector. In CSS, selectors, which are class names, start with a period. The first thing we have to do is add our class attribute to the HTML element and set the value equal to caption. Next, we go to the CSS pane and type a period, then our class name, caption. Then, we finish our CSS rule just like we did with the H2 selector and add our styles. Notice that in the browser, only the paragraph with the class of caption gets the new font size style. Classes can come in handy because they are reusable. This means they can be used more than once on a page. The same class name can be used on different elements if they need to receive the same styles. In our website, we want to apply the same caption class name we used in the paragraph to the anchor tag. In our HTML pane, let's add a class of caption to our anchor tag. We don't need to do anything else to the CSS for our font size styles to be applied to the anchor tag. Another way to style your HTML is to use an ID attribute. ID attributes work the same way as classes. So let's break down this example. We're saying here that we want the ID site content to have a padding of 40 pixels and the background color set to white smoke. While ID attributes work the same as classes, there are two key differences between them. First, instead of a period, we start our ID selector with a number symbol. And secondly, unlike classes, IDs are not reusable. You can have multiple elements that use an ID attribute, but they all have to have unique values. The example on the left shows what you can't do. You cannot reuse the same ID value site. You can, however, reuse the same attribute using different ID values, like we have here on the right. So, to recap, element selectors are the HTML elements you use to mark up your content. Classes are attributes that you can add to your HTML elements. They can be used more than once in your HTML, and you can use them in your CSS by starting them with period. IDs are the attributes added to your HTML where the value for each element is unique. You use them in your CSS by starting them with a number symbol. An easy way to remember the difference between classes and IDs is an ID is like your school ID number. It uses the number symbol and is unique to you. Classes at school have periods, and so do classes in CSS. Now we're at a good place to talk about the cascading and cascading style sheets. You can think of your styles like a waterfall. Some styles will trickle down from a parent element to its children. If we style our footer element and give it both a background color of black and a color style of white, the color style will cascade or be applied to all of the child elements nested in the footer. In this case, the parent element is the footer and the child element is the paragraph, women in space. So, our footer will have a background color of black and our paragraph text will have the color white. So far, we've added a few colors to our website. We've added deep pink, black, and white. These are just a few examples of named colors we can use when styling websites. Named colors are a collection of predefined colors with easy-to-remember names. You can find a list of all named colors to use in your website at the following link. We also added a fun font family to our website called Bungee. While we can use some font families like Arial, Verdana, and Georgia without adding special code to our website, we can also add fun custom fonts from Google Web Fonts. To make it easier to find a custom font for your website, we've made a list of our favorite Google Web Fonts and include all of the code you need to use them. After you've browsed the fonts and found a font family that you would like to use, copy the first line of code that starts with @import. Paste this line of code at the very top of your CSS pane in CodePen. Going back to the list of font families, you can copy and paste the second line of code, the one that begins with the font family property, and paste that into whichever CSS rule you would like to use it in. Now you know the basics of CSS and are ready to start styling your own website. Happy coding!